Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I can read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. So before we dive into our letter today, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce my co-host for today's letter reading, Laura, who is not only a colleague of mine, but also a very good friend. And before we get into things, Laura, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone what it is you do and specialize in?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Laura. I am an online dating coach. I actually have a background in marketing and copywriting, and that's kind of how I ended up in this field. I thought that online dating is really similar to advertising yourself. So I realized that a lot of my skills from my professional life kind of translated when I was on apps, online dating. And then I also just always had a really strong interest in psychology. I did some college level courses, almost minored in psychology. So just in my personal life, I've also spent a lot of time going down psychology rabbit holes and research. Have a lot of friends like Ken that are in the space. So it's just topics that I'm constantly talking about. Because of that, we talk about attachment styles a lot. So I'm happy to be here and talk to you guys today and lend some of my expertise to this letter.
I should also add that Laura is no stranger to having a pretty solid understanding of attachment theory. So, between her marketing expertise, her dating skill set, and also her eye for attachment, thought this would be a really good collaborative exercise because Laura is someone who's very good at being like, oh, yeah, I can spot the insecurity in this person from a mile away. There is a name for this. So, with that all in mind, let's get straight into this letter given to us today by Emily. So, Emily starts by saying, thank you, Ken, for reading my letter and for your thoughts. I've learned a lot from you through finding your page. You are very welcome, Emily. Thank you very much for the kind words. I'm going to try and keep a long story short. I'm a woman who's 36 years old, and I met my now ex, a dude who was 34, midway through 2021 in Cairns, Australia. At the time, I'd been living there for a year, and he had moved up earlier that year. After only a few months of dating, he told me he was moving back to Melbourne and invited me to move with him. However, at that stage, I felt it was too soon for me to move interstate for someone I'd only dated a few months. I was also not ready to leave my job. We did long distance for almost 18 months, a bit too long, and talked many times about me moving down, having a family, building a future together. During this time, we did break up and get back together again. Okay, before I continue, Laura, what are your thoughts on this? Because I already feel like I agree with Emily. Like, I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on in a very short space of time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with her that moving in after just a few months of dating is relatively soon. I know there's people that are like, when you know, but
Yeah.
I mean, with a divorce rate of over 50%, most people don't actually know, even when they think they know. So I think she was smart to kind of say, no, that's a little bit too soon. And that maybe was like red flag number one of like, why is someone so sure so soon and want to take such a big step? It kind of gives a little bit of love bombing to me. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. I think to complement what you said, one thing that sort of stands out to me is you'd been only after a few months of dating, he's inviting you to move to Melbourne with him. Like that's pretty intense. But what's interesting to me is also how you said we did long distance for almost 18 months. And you also mentioned how that was too long and talked many times about moving together. I find it fascinating how, on one hand, there's been this history of dating for a very long time with like long distance communication. But then as things escalated, it was escalating real fast. And so it seems like a lot of this has been engineered on this guy's terms. Like to me, it almost feels like, 18 months of protracted communication. And then all of a sudden, when things started to become dating territory, that's when he was like, let's escalate this and come with me to Melbourne. So, bit interesting.
Yeah, I also thought it gave like a little bit like hot and cold, and maybe I don't know if it's disorganized attachment. We have to keep going through the letter. But I thought it was interesting that he wanted to move in together. And then when she said no, he continued to do long distance and stay in the relationship. Part of that to me could say maybe there was actually relief that, even though he said he wanted to move quickly, when she said no, there was some relief because he didn't force him to get as vulnerable. And that's why it was able to continue for 18 more months long distance. But hard to say for sure.
That's a really good point you just made because I do know that a lot of fearful avoidance or disorganized attaches, and I should say, when I say a lot, I'm really referring to people who are more in that severe category, can be very big romantics. So they may like the idea of escalating things. And that's not to say they don't have romantic feelings for you. It's just to say they can get high on the romance and they can like the idea of the chase. But the minute that things start to escalate into a full-blown relationship, that's when they're like, nope, too hard for me. I can't give you what you need, etc. We all know the lines. But let's continue with what Emily is saying. So, in September 23, he encouraged me to quit my job, sell all my furniture, etc., to move down. We pack me up and I moved down to Melbourne. Now, for anyone who's listening to this who isn't from Australia, just to let you know, if you're moving to anywhere in Australia, it's a big commitment. It's not like if you're living in some compacted parts of the world where, it's just an hour or two away. Moving state in Australia is a big thing and it's a big investment for a lot of people. Anyways, Emily continues. We arrive in Melbourne. He went away for 3 nights on a football trip, and I felt very alone. Yeah, I bet you did. I had a trip planned to visit Perth to visit my family, which, again, for context, is the furthest removed city in the world from any other major city. Planned to visit my family in Perth for 2 weeks after we arrived back. It was poor planning. Whilst home visiting my family, we had a small fight on the phone, and when I arrived back in Melbourne, I could feel everything had changed between us. Within 2 weeks of arriving back in Melbourne, he broke it off with me. A few days before I was meant to start my new job in Melbourne. I had nowhere to go, so I moved back in with my family in Perth. I didn't find a job until January 2024. It was a really tough time for me. It feels like he is always there, helping out, helping his family and friends, although he couldn't really be there for me when I moved and needed support setting in. I'm just going to take a pause here because I can see there's more to Emily's letter, but I just want to take a moment here to say, I am really sorry that you've gone through that because that is hardcore abandonment. Laura, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can't express enough how sorry I am either. That's such a difficult situation to give up, where you live, your community there, your job, to start somewhere new only to be unsupported is just devastating. So sorry for that. I think this is something that Ken, you probably agree with this, is quite common with attachment styles. When moving in together seems to be like a very make or break moment, and does scare a lot of people. And I agree with what you said earlier, which is like People who maybe have like a fearful avoidant attachment, even dismissive avoidant, like most of the time, they're not purposely manipulating you. They actually do feel strong feelings for you. And maybe as he was saying all of these things, he thought he meant them. And then it was only once you got there that it became all too real and he panicked and had a complete opposite reaction to everything that he had been saying to you before. I think that's a pretty common reaction with some avoidant attachment. Can let me know if I'm on the mark there.
No, you are. I was going to say, I've personally gone through an experience very much like this too, and I actually relate very much to the line of, you know, when we arrived in Melbourne, he went away for 3 nights on a football trip, and I felt very alone. I've had a very similar situation like that where I moved my life to connect with someone, and they weren't there to support me during that period of time. I can tell you that as someone who considers themselves to be reasonably sensible, if I had someone who I knew was coming to stay in my hometown, I'm not planning a 3 night football trip for when they arrive. And to me, this just feels so disrespectful. It's like you're moving your life to be with someone who you really care about. Is that football trip really essential? Like, I mean, I just sort of think this is such, a disconnect from he's convincing you to come and be with him. Why the heck is he going on a football trip for 3 nights when you arrive? Like this just seems like a night and day comparison in energy and tone. And it goes back to what you were saying even earlier. We're really starting to get into hot and cold territory.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that's such a huge thing to ask of someone to uproot their entire life for you, that for you to not even be there to kind of help them adjust that first weekend. It does seem like such a cold, like snub of a thing to do. I do think, is there a chance that the football trip was planned far, far in advance? Maybe, but then why was that weekend chosen? Again, maybe there was something on her end that she had to move that weekend because of a lease ending. I don't know, but I agree with you that at the end of the day, it's like if your partner is moving to a new city to live with you, maybe a football trip is not really something that measures up to that level of gravity. And you should probably be able to prioritize better. And it just seemed like he wasn't willing to prioritize her well-being in this situation.
No, I completely agree with you. And, I can understand that feeling of feeling very alone because you're isolated. And also, it can make you feel like you're not supported, you're not being protected. And it's a big thing to move just about anywhere. And when you don't have that partner who's got your back and has, been the one encouraging you to go there, I mean, that can be a betrayal as well, too. So it's really, really awful and can make you just feel like, why the hell did I move here? So I can understand that aspect. And I got to tell you, like having a huge period of time where you couldn't find work from what sounds like it was September all the way to January of 2024, that's, it may be only like technically 4 months, but like that's an intense 4 months because it seems like there's a major breakup happening where you've had all of this betrayal and abandonment. And then you've got to go through the process of job hunting which is pretty vicious. And I think that what's also terrible is you mentioned how he's someone who's always looking out for his friends and his family, but he couldn't be there to support his intimate partner. That's a joke.
Yeah, it's a really vulnerable position that she's in, because I actually think there's so much overlap between jobs and relationships. In a way, dating is very similar to job hunting, and it's such a vulnerable position to put yourself in over and over to, and as much as you're interviewing the person, whether you're on a date with them or you're going for a job, you're interviewing them, but they're also interviewing you, and that can just feel um like you're so vulnerable and even if the job doesn't choose you or a partner doesn't pick you and it has nothing to do with you, it's really hard not to take it personally when so much rejection comes at one time. So yeah, I really feel for her in this position. And I think actually I'm probably kind of uniquely positioned to answer this letter as well, because as you know, Ken, I actually relocated to another country to be with my partner. And even though thankfully it has worked out fairly well so far, I can say even having a partner that is supportive of the move, it is so destabilizing to uproot your entire life to a brand new place, to quit your job and have to figure out what to do next. Like those are all things that I'm struggling with now, right now too. And again, I can't overstate how much I feel for you, having gone through this because it is extremely difficult.
Although I suppose in your case, Laura, I mean, and again, out of respect to your privacy too, like I think it's been wonderful, obviously, having a partner who's been there to support you through what you're going through. And I think that it is one of those things where, if you are going through that transition of moving, anywhere, and you don't have that person who is going to be there by your side, oh my God, that can just completely ruin everything and can just be so destabilizing amongst everything else that's going on as well too. So, I agree. I think you are uniquely positioned to talk about this based on your experience as well too. And I mean, could you imagine, and this is me being cheeky, could you imagine if you also didn't have your partner there for you for the first 3 days because they were off doing, you know, a wine tour and wasn't there for you when you arrived?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I thought of when hearing what she was saying is like even having my partner here, it was so hard. And I mean, there's like another added barrier in my situation. There's language barrier where I live, so I don't speak the language, so that makes it a lot scarier. And thankfully, I guess within Australia, you wouldn't have that problem. But
No.
um, even beyond that, though, whether there's a language barrier or not, if you don't know your way around an area, if you don't know anyone other than your partner, it's really scary. It is extremely scary. Even to this day, I've been in the country I live in now for over 6 months, and I still I'm scared all the time because I'm like, if I don't have my boyfriend to rely on, I really can't get around. I don't really have any support system. It's really scary. So I completely understand that feeling of not only are you in this new place, but now you've lost the one support system that you do have that is devastating and so, so difficult.
Completely agreed. Let's continue with what Emily has said. So Emily continues, he came to visit a few times in Perth, and I asked him only to visit if he was serious about getting back together. After visiting, he said he couldn't get back together. I'll get to that point in a minute because I'm keen to address that, but I can see we're nearly finished with our letter. In May 2024, I took a job in Cambodia because I needed a fresh start. We'd been messaging and I asked him to no longer contact me. He told me he wanted to visit. We had the best time together while he was here. He went home 2 weeks ago and told me he couldn't further our relationship. He couldn't see a future with us. I'm obviously really hurt. I thought he was my person. Before we get to Emily's questions, I want to just address some of my thoughts and feelings with regards to this. I want to start out by saying the amount of selfishness in this guy is unreal. Like, even if, whilst I can't put a diagnosis on him, like, it's pretty awful for him to basically take advantage of your hospitality by coming to Perth when you set a very clear boundary, which is if you're not serious about this, don't do it. And subsequently goes to Cambodia, has an intense, amazing time with you, only to then, conclude recently, I don't see a future with us. It's like, dude, get your head checked. And this is actually really abusive behavior, in my opinion. He may not have done this intentionally, but this is pretty emotionally manipulative, selfish, and abusive stuff. So I'm going to take a breath. Laura, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, my take on this is it's kind of what you just said. My guess is that this isn't malicious, this isn't intentional, but that doesn't make it right. And I think that this person sounds just extremely lost. I do think that he probably cares quite deeply for you,
I agree.
but he had because you don't travel, you don't spend money on plane tickets and travel hours to another country to see someone that you just don't care about at all. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I do think that this person does have strong feelings for you. I just think that the issue is within himself. You know, he can't sort out what he actually wants from a relationship. He can't bring himself to get to a level of vulnerability to commit fully to someone. And I think that's why it almost makes the perfect sense that he likes visiting you somewhere really far away from where he lives, because then the excuse to end the relationship doesn't have to be anything to do with you or with him. It can be like, oh, well, it just doesn't make sense because I don't want to do long distance anymore and we live in different countries or we live in different states. And that kind of gives him such an easy out to be able to keep having a great time with you, but never let it get so serious anymore.
I completely agree with everything you said. The guy clearly has strong positive feelings for you, but I think anytime it gets particularly closer, he comes back with similar lines of like, we can't, excuse me, we can't get back together. We can't further our relationship. Like to me, it seems like, he's dictating how this relationship goes between the two of you. He's controlling the intensity of a lot of this stuff too. And again, I don't think it's done maliciously. Like when I say control, I want to make it very clear. I don't think this guy has a strategy bone in his body for any of this sort of stuff. I think he's being a helpless romantic in a lot of this. I think that, what he's doing is really emotionally damaging, and he definitely needs a long stint in therapy to work through this sort of stuff. But do I think that he's out there trying to just, play you? I sort of think what would be in it for him? Because I mean, at the end of the day, he's wasting a lot of time and money just to visit you because, you know, on one hand, he misses you, but then at the same time, he can't further the relationship. I mean, to me, it just seems like this is driven by very highly irrational behavior.
Yeah, I just think what I would say to Emily is that, you deserve someone that what is willing to make bold moves for you and to be there for you and to take the same amount of risk and effort that you're making in the relationship, and this person doesn't seem able or willing to do that. I think it's a mistake to think of him coming to visit as a grand gesture, because I think that it's actually the easiest, most comfortable thing for him to do is to visit you somewhere far away where you're in this vacation bubble and you're not really in real life with real issues, with family, with friends, with work. You're just in like this vacation bubble where everything is easy and happy. And for somebody that's not willing to get vulnerable, who's not willing to commit, that's actually the most comfortable place for him to be. He's not really risking anything. He's not really putting any strong effort in. And you deserve someone who is willing to do that, because you've already shown that you're a partner that's willing to do that.
I completely agree. I think the best that he could do was actually that long distance stint of 18 months. Like to me, that was his comfort
Hmm.
zone. He was, even if he was pining for you, wanting you to move, and look, I've heard similar stories like this plenty of times. And I'm confident that he absolutely does want to be with you. And he probably was, saying things like, oh, you're like a drug to me. I would love to be with you. You're amazing. Let's make this happen, etc. I can assure you that the intense excitement of connecting with you was probably later overshadowed by the reality of what maintaining and continuing that relationship would actually involve. And I think that, as Laura said, coming to Cambodia, going to visit you and your family in Perth, even inviting you to Melbourne to a degree, like it's interesting how in Cambodia, it's all hunky-dory. But the minute you move down to Melbourne, where it was actually more real because he's got an established life there, oh no, can't do that. Need to go on my footy trip for 3 nights because that's what's comfortable. No, to me, this man's got serious, serious fears of intimacy, meaning it just seems like this is what, his comfort zone is. It's distance on his terms, even if it seems like he's saying contrary things to that too. So, Emily's questions are, I don't understand why he came all the way to Cambodia. I'm really struggling, feeling worse than I did before I arrived. I still would like to work things out with him. Do you think that's possible? Okay. Um, should we answer the last part before going to the first part? Because I want to be gentle, but I also think there needs to be a bit of realism with this as well, too.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you start then?
I think this is, if I'm being gentle and both realistic, I think this is what it is. Like to me, unless he actually works on his fear of being close to you and actually committing to you, he's always going to do this. And it's so not fair. Now, does that mean that I don't think does that mean that I think you should break up with him? I don't want to say that on the basis that I think that can be a very big move to make. for a lot of people, and it can be very uncomfortable. I know Laura was saying earlier, you deserve someone who's actually making those bold moves for you. But I'm someone who doesn't want to just jump in and be like, you need to do this XYZ move. I actually think maybe what does need to happen is maybe there needs to be a conversation around, are you capable of actually working on this with me? Because we obviously have a lot of strong positive feelings for each other, but it seems like every time we try and commit, something gets in the way between us. So that's probably what I would suggest if I were in your shoes with this situation. But I've got to be honest, this is not looking good at all. Like it seems like it's having a huge toll on your mental health and emotional well-being. And worse, this was intended to be a fresh start, and now you're back to square one.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think something you said earlier that was an important distinction is like, I do think that this person cares deeply about you, but when it gets too real and when the relationship starts escalating is when he panics. And if you're wanting a serious relationship, he's not going to be able to give you that because every time that it's gone in that direction is when he's bolted. So I just think it's important, I guess, when you're evaluating whether you should give it another shot with him or not, to think about whether or not he's capable of that. And that kind of comes down to what Ken said, which is maybe having more of these conversations if you don't feel that you already have the answer from your previous conversations with him. And actually seeing him put effort into doing something different. But my caution with that is that it may have seemed like he already did that by saying, okay, move. Like, yeah, I'm ready for you to move. And then as soon as you did, he actually wasn't ready. So I think it's really hard to trust someone like this when his words and actions haven't really aligned throughout almost this entire story. So I think what it comes down to for me is just asking yourself, like, is that a deal breaker or not? Personally, can you date someone whose words and actions don't align? Are you able to establish a healthy amount of trust with somebody like that, that they're going to be able to be there for you? Because that's really the foundation of a healthy relationship is trust. Is this someone that you actually feel like you're going to be able to trust?
I completely agree. And based on this, it seems like, you're understandably, I think, being set back over and over and over again. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is not the end of this experience because he's shown repeatedly to come back to you in one form or another. And so there is a high likelihood that this is going to be a boomerang cycle where he potentially comes back. And I'm not saying that to give you false hypervigilance or hope, even. It's just to say that there is evidence to suggest that whenever he doesn't feel particularly good about having stepped back, he seems to want to try and come forward to you after he breaks up from you every time. So the likelihood of him returning around for another opportunity, oh yeah, it could definitely happen. But one thing I will say, and this is just out of warning because I've seen this happen very often, this does a lot of damage to your brain. Like when you're getting this amount of intermittent reinforcement, encouragement that he seems to want to see you. Oh my God, he loves me. But then every time he backs away, what have I done wrong? Is there something wrong with me? I feel so broken and helpless, and I feel like I'm really struggling, which, by the way, very fair and valid. It can create this push-pull cycle, which is also having a detrimental impact on your ability to discern what's up, what's down, how this relationship is going to operate. And it can severely compromise your own well-being, your immune system, how you function day to day. So personally, you've got to also think about the fact too that this is also going to have a deteriorous impact on your well-being if it doesn't get better. And at the end of the day, I think, it sounds like you could be in a place where emotionally you feel like you're at rock bottom. I can't make that assessment for you. That's a personal thing. But I do think something needs to change ASAP because this ain't sustainable by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I think you raised some really great points. I think what I keep thinking about at this stage and what's going on with their relationship is that Emily, it's really on you to assert stronger boundaries. And I think that she's actually done a pretty good job at boundaries. I liked that at the beginning of the story. She said that she felt it was too soon to move in together and she asserted a boundary and said, no, I'm not ready for that. I think that was awesome. I think the fact that she felt unsupported when she did move in with him, she said, okay, this isn't for me and I'm moving away and gonna make a new life for myself. Like those are very strong and healthy boundaries. But I think where the boundaries for me are missing right now is that it seems like he kind of comes into her life in that boomerang fashion whenever he feels like it. And whenever he reappears, she welcomes him in with open arms. But I think I'm not saying she shouldn't. I agree with you. It's up to her to really decide whether she wants to fully walk away or not. But I think anytime that this guy reemerges, Emily should already have a clear idea in her head of what behavior she can and cannot accept and what relationship non-negotiables need to be in place before even welcoming this guy back in and moving forward in any capacity. Those things need to be met. And if they're not, then this shouldn't continue because, like you said, this is going to have this really detrimental effect on her mental health, her life, her ability to move forward in other relationships. So I think it's really important for her to really clarify within herself, like, what am I willing to accept? What behavior is completely unacceptable? What kind of relationship do I need to have in order to feel safe and stable and secure? And if this guy cannot rise to the occasion, then she has to say, I'm not willing to entertain this anymore.
I completely agree. To complement what you've said, I would agree that Emily has done a fabulous job of actually asserting boundaries from the very get-go. But I think the thing is, this guy is not respecting boundaries. If anything, I don't think I don't think it's out of maliciousness. I just think this guy, would probably say anything in the moment to connect with you when he wants to. But then when he does and he gets close, he just deactivates and he's walking back on his word. And so I think the boundaries that are being used at this point in time are probably not as effective as you would like for this particular situation, because this leads, I guess, to the second question that we haven't answered yet is, I don't understand why he came all the way to Asia. Well, my answer is, and it links to what I was saying, is this man's completely driven by emotion. Like he is not thinking this rationally whatsoever. In the moment, he's probably telling you, I respect your boundaries. Absolutely, we should work on this. Let's improve my communication skills. I don't want to do that to you again. But the minute it gets too hard, all that intense excitement turns into intense fear, and he is not thinking about what's in your best interest. It just becomes completely selfish. I think to answer the question, I don't understand why he came all the way to Cambodia. For me, it's like, I don't think this was done with strategy. Like, I don't think, to me, a rational human being who was like, I don't think that this relationship is good for me for whatever reason, isn't about to chase their ex to a place they've gone when they want time away from the relationship. This is someone who's behaving from a very different level. And something I always remind people is, when you're trying to understand these dynamics, try and take the strategy, the thought, the planning out of this, focus on the emotion. Why would someone be motivated to do this from an emotional level? And it becomes a little easier to understand. But, anyways, that's my little TED talk on that. Laura, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I kind of already answered this in some of the earlier feedback that I gave, but I agree with what you're saying. But I think the other layer of this is that when someone's avoidant, which again, we can't really diagnose him for sure, but many avoidant tendencies in this story,
Oh, yeah.
I do think that a vacation is literally the easiest time to be with someone. There are no real life stakes involved. He is on a trip far away from all of his real life stuff. He likes you, has strong feelings for you, and is in this happy emotional bubble, getting to enjoy that without any of the real life relationship stuff going on. I agree that I don't think that it was a strategy of like, this is great. I can enjoy a relationship with you without all the real life stuff. I don't think that he had that mentality going into it, but I do think that he was driven to spend time with you, like Ken said, because he has strong feelings for you. And then while he was there, was thinking this is really great. But when he thought probably in that moment, can this transition back to real life? Probably thought no. Just like when you guys moved in together and it got too real, that's when he really completely pulled away. It's comfortable for him to be on a trip when you're not anywhere near real life. It's not comfortable for him to be together in real life.
I completely agree. So I guess with that all in mind, my closing thoughts and feelings on this, again, just to say, Emily, I'm truly sorry that you've gone through this experience. I went through a variation of this not too long ago, and it was absolute hell, and it's just not fair. You don't deserve what happened to you at all. And I'm really, really, really sorry that you've been going through this experience because it doesn't sound like it's over. If anything, it sounds like this is an ongoing related challenge. And again, I want to just round out here even in spite of all the critical, negative sounding things that I've said about this guy, it does sound like he also has parts of him that are amazing. It sounds like, this guy has some amazing qualities to him. Otherwise, you wouldn't spend time with him. And it sounds like the love between the two of you is obviously very intense. I mean, hell, that's why I think he's coming back to you over and over and over again. And at the same time, he also has this very strong avoidant part to him. So unless he's going to work on that, I think this is it. It's going to be more of the same. So yeah, Laura, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to echo everything you said. That's something that we didn't really touch on, and I think is so important to acknowledge is the reason that we all get stuck on people like this is because they do have many amazing qualities as well. I know she did say in the letter, like, I thought this was my person, and that's something I can so relate to. Having a relationship end and being devastated, thinking, but everything felt right, and I envisioned this incredible future with them, and now it's being torn away, and like, how could I have believed all of that, and it isn't coming true. It's so difficult to move past a feeling like that. But I guess I would just go back to what I said earlier, which is I think really the answer in this situation, in my opinion, is just getting super, super, super real with yourself and saying, like, what kind of relationship dynamic do I need? And is this person able to provide that? And I understand that he keeps saying that he can provide it, but he's repeatedly shown you that even when he says he does that, he says he can provide that, he doesn't actually provide that. So I think it's really just continuing to get clear with yourself on what your boundaries actually are. And when I say boundaries, I want to be clear. I don't mean necessarily boundaries for him, because as Ken said, he doesn't seem to really respect the boundaries you put in place. You moved to an entirely other country and he still showed up and wanted to spend time with you. I'm talking more about boundaries from within. And asking yourself, what am I willing to accept? Like whether it's three strikes and you're out, whatever that is for you, what's that threshold? And has he already exceeded that? I think that's kind of the question that you need to ask yourself, and it's really up to you on whether this is over or not. You can make that decision. And I think that you are someone that has a really strong conviction in what you want. Like we said, you put some really amazing boundaries in place early on. I think you know what you want. I think you know that you've obviously been hurt by this behavior enough that you are trying to work through it with people like us. So I think that it's really just about getting clear with yourself and what you want and standing firm in what that is. And I think if you do some solid work in that area, you're gonna come to a conclusion that's gonna be right for you.
I completely agree. And that conclusion may not necessarily be a drastic action, but I think that at the very least, it'll lead you closer to, I think, a direction that may be in your best interests in the long run. So completely agree with everything you've said, Laura. So yes, just to round out, thank you again, Emily, for your submission. I look, by thanking you, I'm not saying amazing narrative skills. It's more of I'm sorry that you're going through this, and thank you for trusting in us to actually share your story and provide space for it too. And just as we're running out, Laura, I know you're in a position where you obviously have a lot of expertise on this. Are you currently taking any clients to work with on stuff like this, or are you mostly focusing on other things at the moment?
I am open to taking clients. I don't have like a page up where they can sign up, but if anyone's interested in working with me, you're always welcome to send me a DM or an email. I have a website. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, so always happy to help.
And where can people find you if they want to check more of your information out?
Yeah, my account handle is at kissed and dismissed, all spelled out, and the website is the same, kissedanddismissed.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. If you found it very helpful, at the very least relatable, validating, that's incredible. That's what we want. If you would like to leave a review for us, that helps to know that the podcast is at least being of value to you. And I, at the very least, will be back for a future episode. And Laura, thank you again for participating in this episode and this letter reading.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And Emily, I wish you the very best.
Likewise, Emily, thank you again.